Hi, everyone. My name is Rick Baker. I'm with Russ Blind Sotheby's International Realty in Sedona, Arizona, and I'm happy to be here today with Sheila Long. And Sheila is with Old Republic Exchange. How are you doing today, Sheila?
Doing well. Thanks for having me here today.
Sure, my pleasure. So I just took a moment earlier this morning to read over your bio, and it says that you are the you're the vice president and regional sales executive for Old Republic Exchange in the Southwest and Mountain States region. And you've received your bachelor's degree in liberal studies from Arizona State University. And you have over 20 years real estate experience working in both residential and commercial real estate. And you're an affiliate of several realtor associations. And you're an active member in the Commercial Real Estate Services Committee for the Scottsdale Association of Realtors, as well as several other professional associations. And you enjoy spending your time teaching and educating regarding the 1031 exchange process. So which is kind of what we're doing here today. And it includes classes with realtors, escrow agents, CPAs, and board associations. So glad you could be here today.
Thanks for having me again. Yes, so it's been definitely enjoy teaching. So happy to dive in and hope some of you out there get some value from this.
Yeah. I remember the first time we met, I was sitting at the front desk at the Sotheby's office in Sedona. You came in to introduce yourself, and then we had a conference with several of our office agents. And then I don't know if you remember all this or not. And then you had a much larger, this was several years ago. And then you had a larger class at the Sedona Library. And so through that, I'm, totally impressed with your knowledge and expertise. And you've been my go-to person for 1031 exchange ever since then. So I'm grateful to have you here today to be able to talk about this.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So getting started, what is I know 1031, that's a tax code thing, that's where it gets its name, but for someone who might not know, basically, what is a 1031 exchange and who might benefit from it?
Yes. Okay. So the 1031 exchange is a tax code for those that are holding investment property. That's the word that you need to remember. That's the type of property, okay, Rick, that your clients have to be aware of. If you're selling land, commercial, or residential that's not held for personal use, like a primary home, that is when a taxpayer or a seller can take advantage of the tax deferral under the 1031 rules.
Okay, and so I know there's a rule in there, something about, it says it has to be a like kind exchange. Could you talk a little bit about
Yes. Okay. So under this, remember our first one that all of you want to listen in and remember is that it has to be investment to investment. Okay. So it must be investment to investment. There's a term called like kind. And this is one where some of our own tax advisors make mistakes on. They think that it has to be like the same make and model, right? Like a car. It doesn't. So if you sell residential, do you have to buy residential again? Do you sell commercial? Must you buy commercial again? No. So like kind simply means any real estate for another. So your clients, you out there, you taxpayers, anyone that's listening in here, you can take raw land and you can buy, say, an apartment complex. Take a commercial building, buy multifamily or residential, sell one and buy multiple, right? Or sell multiple to buy one. Like kind means held for investment at the time of acquiring it. So that's really important, and a term even some of our own tax advisors make mistakes on. So that's good for you all to know that it does mean any real estate for another.
Okay. So when you say that there are different types, is this what you mean by different types of exchanges, or what are the different types of exchanges that?
Yes. Okay. We're going to go a little deep here for those listening in. So there are 4 different types of exchanges. And the most common was once known as the Starker exchange or a forward exchange. It's called the delayed. Okay. So that's one. Delayed exchange means you sell, you buy again. There's something called a simultaneous exchange. That simply means when you close on the same day. Let's say that they're selling in Arizona, but they want to go buy in Florida. Can they do that? Yes. So you can sell and buy in any state and US territory except Puerto Rico. So you can take it in Arizona and go buy in Guam or Virgin Islands. It does not have to be state specific. Okay, so a simultaneous exchange would say they're closing in Arizona, but yet they're buying in Florida or on the East Coast somewhere, and we allow one escrow company to wire direct. That's all that means, simultaneous. Okay. There's also a reverse exchange and an improvement exchange, and we can talk about those in another class because we can go on and on. But let me tell you simply, a reverse exchange allows the taxpayer to acquire the replacement property first, and then the timeline starts and they sell. Okay, that's a really big one and a fun one that we should probably do a whole nother topic on, as well as the improvement exchange, which allows the taxpayer to identify a replacement property and the improvements they want to make. And so long as they do it within a timeline, which I'm sure you'll ask me about that in a bit,
Yeah.
it is called an improvement exchange, and it's possible. So there are 4 different types of exchanges, and it doesn't mean the like kind, right? It means they could take any real estate for another and perform one of those 4 types of exchange transactions.
Okay. So yeah, so if someone is, I mean, one of the main ideas I've gotten from learning about the 1031 exchange is that you have to have this exchange set up, because the money goes into an account with your intermediary. And so there's a timeline involved, right? So it's something, if you're going to do, you really need to do it, be aware that you're going to be doing it way before, maybe even before you put your property on the market, unless you're doing a reverse exchange, which is, you mentioned, right? Maybe. But so why don't you talk a little bit more about those timelines and what are some of the rules people might know?
I think the most important thing that you said is it needs to be set up in advance. If anyone here is listening in, this is the most important rule. It must be set up in advance. And what does that mean? That means you need to get with a qualified intermediary. That's what we are. A 1031 exchange requires a qualified intermediary, someone acting as that exchange accommodator, that facilitator. Okay. Once they set up that exchange, and it is specific to their buyer, okay, and then specific to their seller on the other end, exchange documents are prepared. What is that? It's more paperwork. It's called an exchange agreement. Okay. And the day they close, and now we're talking about this timeline. So I'd like you to see this timeline visual here. Okay, that I know you're going to share with us. So while you're looking at this timeline, there's a timeline that starts the day you close on the property you're selling. It's called the relinquished property. At that time, that's day 0. You now have an exchange period of 180 days. That's your total exchange period that you're entitled to use to acquire replacement property. Okay, so day 0 is the day you close on your relinquished property. You then have 180 days to acquire replacement property. But within that is something called the identification period. This is the timeline that is going to cause most taxpayers to lose sleep at night. This is what I like to joke, because it really does. It's 45 days to identify. 45 calendar days, Rick, from the time that they close on their relinquished property. They must identify replacement property, and they must close on something that they identify. And identifying is meaning putting a list together in writing where they sign a date saying, I'm going to buy one of these properties. And they must acquire that within that exchange period. Does that make sense?
It does. And so it kind of puts the pressure on a little bit. And the reason is because I think, just to clarify, is we're trying to avoid paying capital gains on that property is the basic reason, is what's happening here, right?
Yes. And it's very limiting. And that's one of those where, with proper planning, yes, when do you get a qualified intermediary involved? Well, I always say the sooner the better. It's best that, and you'll hear me say the taxpayer, right? Because that's what they are in our world. So in my world. So it is best that the seller, the taxpayer, the exchanger, gets with their CPA or their professional tax preparer, as well as a qualified intermediary, so they understand these timelines. So that this daunting 45 days that comes up doesn't creep up on them and they don't expect it. So it is something they need to prepare for in advance before selling, is what I would suggest.
And as a real estate agent, I've been in a couple of transactions in which the person who's going to sell as a 1031 exchange has actually identified the property they're going to buy, they're acquiring property, and the relinquishing property hasn't even sold yet. So as a contingency, so that's a possibility.
Yes, it is.
To ease up on that timeline a little bit. So I've done that a couple of times. And but absolutely, it's never too early if you're contemplating this to get advice about it and understand the rules, because it can be just a little bit complicated, and you need somebody who's knowledgeable to help you out. And so another question I have, when you talk about 1031 exchange companies, are they all the same, and are they regulated? And tell us a little bit about how Old Republic might be different.
Yeah, and that is such an interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize, because we're talking about a tax code. 1031 exchange is stands for section 1031. And automatically a taxpayer thinks, well, anyone that aligns themselves as a qualified intermediary must be reputable. You mentioned this. It's not a regulated industry. That's scary. So if you know that there's these certain laws, like our lenders have something called a TRID law, okay, there's RESPA laws, right? These are the acronyms for the law that someone's governing and watching. The 1031 exchange is not regulated, meaning that anyone can act as a qualified intermediary, and therefore anyone could close their doors tomorrow or say run off with those funds, and there's no protection. Isn't this surprising? We're talking about a tax code, and there's no protection for a taxpayer who's holding their money. So that's the difference in finding a national qualified intermediary, one that has the backing of maybe, say, another title company. Old Republic Exchange has a sister company. And those of you on here may know of the home warranty or the title company. We aren't either of those. We are a qualified intermediary. We're a sister company with the same parent, Old Republic Insurance. And it's not. We are not all the same. Specifically, Old Republic Exchange guarantees against fraud, errors, and bankruptcy. In the event that something happens to your client's funds, their funds are protected through a letter of indemnity. That's a big deal, because not everyone is the same. And I love mom and pop, Rick, but it's really important. What happens to that QI if, say, they were to happen to have something, with their company go wrong, or they're not there the next day to protect those funds? So do watch out. And I always say, those of you listening in, make sure you do your research, because anyone can hold your funds. Therefore, anything could happen. So do be careful.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask that question, because I know that Old Republic is a very old and established company, and so it's important to have somebody like that for such a transaction. So, well, Sheila, I think this is excellent. This is a good introduction for people, a good video for people who might be interested in learning more about the 1031 exchange. Some basic information we're giving them here. And so if someone wants to contact you to find out more, I went to your website earlier today, oldrepublicexchange.com, and contact us. I noticed that if there's a map, if they clicked on Arizona, your contact information came up. So, but I'll also put that information at the end of this video.
Please do. Thank you so much for having me today, and look forward to a follow-up when people want to know more about some of those other types of exchanges.
All right. That sounds great. Well, thank you. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you.